Folks, we're back. Part 2 of our Airbus A380 flat mod. Of course, we've already done a bunch of videos on this thing, so you'll want to check those out. Look down in the description below. You can see what we've done in the past. Spent some time taking a look at it. Of course, we fixed this bogey here most recently. And came in for a landing a little too hard. Hadn't repaired it strong enough. I think we're going to be a lot better now on that. Plus, the flaps are going to help us slow down a lot. As you can see, we got a couple of cuts made already on the flaps. Located the servos. I did some measurement off camera to make sure these are square and true to where we want to put them. And what we're going to do is we're going to finish off our cuts. Now, as you can see on this drawing that's held upside down intentionally, this wing has 6 panels, okay? The wings have 6 total panels, 3 each. They're going to comprise the flaps. Now, the flaps in and of themselves are small wings. They're going to be supported in real life by these canoes, okay? Well, not actually the canoes. The canoes house the equipment that allow for the deflection of the flaps. And so if we look at this image, we can get a better shot of kind of how that looks, this little triangular area. Okay, now we're not going to be able to accomplish that easily. It's just way overkill for the size of this plane. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to hinge right here, 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 right at the bottom. And we're going to do it in such a way that these things shoot out. And if you ever wondered why these things are painted red, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say they're painted red because when these flaps are deployed, those things hang pretty low to the ground. And this is the lowest point, lowest point, lowest point, lowest point. That's going to potentially be a hazard for the ground crew. Okay, which is kind of weird because you would think these would be low enough, but I guess they must have made up their mind that that's too easy to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our cut here. But this is a critical cut because we want the angles to line up. And since this is a complex shape, it's not just going to be, you know, like a square shape. You can cut it square if you don't mind it looking totally stupid. See here, look, square and then a different angle. So for practical purposes, you'd be square here and then you'd be up at a steeper angle. Now we can make that up with our hinges. So let's talk about hinges now. We didn't talk about hinges in our first video because we hadn't gotten there yet. Obviously, we're not going to use a hinge like this. This is not going to work well for what we're trying to do here. We could use these dynam hinges if we wanted, which is designed for like a Fowler flap operation. But look how huge they are. I just don't think that's going to work. I think they're too big. Now, you could use a couple of these, and those things could, you know, couple up together and then allow a similar articulation to this. Same could be done with this, but that's going to be just really ugly. You could use tape, that'd be dumb. Gosh, where are the ones I want? They're somewhere in here. You could use a CA hinge, that would also be dumb. Ooh, what do we have here? We have the Dubro Micro Easy Hinge. I don't know if I want to use micros for this. But basically what we're going to do is we need to come up with something. Ooh, what are these? What are these? What are these? Look at this. We got sizes, guys. Different sizes to work with. So what these are, I like to call them knuckle hinges. I don't think that's what they're actually called. These are what we used on the Airbus A320. Let's go ahead and dump a few of these out. These ones are Dubro. These ones are cheap, junky Hobby King ones. The Dubro ones are quite a bit higher quality, but who cares? They do the job. The cheap ones do just fine. So just to give you an idea of my plan, is that these are going to be stuck into, and it looks like we may end up having to use the micro ones on the really far outboard canoe because it's so small. And then we'll use the regular sized ones. Now these are fairly economical hinge in that, you know, they do work for so many different purposes. But when we hinge this, we'll actually stick this in, and then we'll stick this in, and then we'll be allowed to move that out and away. We can just change that angle, but it's probably going to park something like this, and then when it deploys, it'll come down and away. So that's the plan. So we've got those couple of different sizes there. So we'll just come back to this in a few minutes. And remember, we got 3 panels here. So as we cut, we are going to have to cut the canoes. Okay? So we want to cut probably straight. Ideally, we would be able to cut at an angle like this. Okay? So like this. And what that would do is that would produce almost like a wing shape on the front of the flap. But that might be a little bit, I don't know, a little optimistic to expect to be able to do that effectively. So I think after looking at this, we're probably going to have to cut this one cut back a little bit further, a little deeper into the wing. I don't want to cut myself, so I'm just going to keep my fingers back a little bit. I'm just sticking that knife blade through, and then I'm just feeling, yep, it's through there. Okay. Remember, this is a brand new X-Acto knife. So it's extremely sharp. So that was not very fun. I definitely cut myself a little. I'm good at that, aren't I? Okay, so now I'm just kind of coming to, I would say, the front of the wheel, not the front of the tire, the front of the wheel. Now, if you guys were trying to kind of simplify this operation to just make it easier to accomplish a good outcome, you can just do a straight flap. But remember, if you do a straight flap, it's probably going to look kind of dumb. I just want to throw that out there now. Okay, so this cut favors in a little bit too much, so I'm going to shave a little teeny bit off of the inside cut. Just going to take that. You can use a flat screwdriver to do this step too if you're concerned about the blade screwing things up, which is not a bad idea. Alright, cool. So, the first panel, you can see that it's about, I would say it's about 2/3 of the canoe moves out. Okay? So 2/3 would be about here. Okay? So we're just going to carry this over to about there. And I'm just going to make a very light cut, almost like a panel line. We're not actually going to cut anything any beyond that. And now I am going to use a measurement tool to emulate this on the other side, because you do want some symmetry on these. Okay, from the tip to the cut, I can actually just take this, go straight, and I'll just go where this cut starts at the top of the canoe. Okay? So now I can come over here and just actually make a little prick into the... Why was I able to... Oh, because I measured from... How did I... Oh, yeah, that's why. Because I had it like this. Okay, so I'm just going to take and make a mark. Okay, so we've got our little start of the cut. And let's do the end of the cut. Because you can see I got an angle in there. And we'll just measure to there. And this time the same experience. Okay, so now we can carry that and make a straight line. And let's double check the depth of cut into the wing, because now would be the time when we're going to screw this up bad if we don't measure. Okay, so we're just going to double check. That's the end of my cut, which is like 52 millimeters. And it looks like this one here is not quite to the end of the cut either. So it looks like we're about right at 50 millimeters. Whoops, 49 millimeters. And just shy of 49 millimeters. Okay, so 49 millimeters back. I'm going to just make a little gouge in the foam. Okay, remember, I'm just scoring it. I'm not cutting all the way through it all. Okay, so now we've got those two portions approximately the same. That was relatively easy to duplicate. Now, at some point between here and here, there would be a panel change. Okay, so if you imagine on this plane here, it's about halfway. Okay, so if you figure on about halfway, we'll just make a cut. Okay. Again, that's just superficial, but this angle will continue until we hit that cut. See, we're cheating it a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to look at this next canoe, and it looks like where it rides on the canoe, where it would pivot, it almost looks like about 1/4 of the way back. So 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts. Looks like we're going to be a little bit shy of that. I'm just thinking about this, keeping this line as straight as possible now to minimize the headaches that we're going to have. So maybe we need to bring this forward just a hair. Remember, it's just a super shallow cut, so we're not going to lose much material if we do that. Okay, that's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to just carry it back to there. There we go. And that's what it is. That's the way it is, okay? So now I'm just going to go out. I'm just going to carry it out to my final destination here. Okay? See how I did that? Pretty simple. Nothing too magical. You do want to try to keep these cuts as clean as possible. Ah, shoot. Now remember, these are super shallow cuts. We're not cutting through to the other side by any means. So if you make a minor mistake, you can still correct it fairly easily. Like this one here. Okay, so now I can take and try to transpose these cuts to the other side if I'm satisfied. Okay, so it's pretty thin here. I think we'll be able to penetrate through to the top of the wing. And remember, we want it to be like this. If we're going to cut at an angle, we're going to cut at this angle. We don't want to cut at that angle. That'd be counterintuitive. So I'm going to cut the canoe straight, okay? Straight up and down is what I mean by that. Okay. This is another one of those stages where it gets very scary because you're making changes that are pretty finite and they're very final. Now if I'm going to cut at an angle, I'm going to cut this angle. Just a slight angle is probably all I'm going to get away with. So I'm just going to where the wing is thinnest to do this, because then I can come back here and see for sure that I'm getting a good exit. So now is where your cut really matters, to try to keep it nice and straight. But don't support it right underneath where your blade's going to exit, okay? Because that blade is sharp. It will cut you bad. Okay, so now you notice the top of the canoe is still attached. That's all purposeful. Okay. I'm just kind of using this as my alignment now. That and my pre-cut. Okay. And then I'm just kind of gauging my angle a little bit as I go. This is why we get a brand new blade for this. And then as we get to the end, we have to take that number 11 blade and bring it in tight to where the canoe is. Okay? And we don't want to cut up our beam bag in this case, so I'll just go ahead and move it up a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going a little bit steeper angle as we get into the thicker material. Okay. And then this is where we have our cut and then turn. Now turn. Okay, so now this one. At a slight angle. Understanding that we're going to have to negotiate around this somehow, which means I'll have to walk the blade under first, then come back around on the other side of the bogie, and then finish between the two wheels. Okay? Alright, great. Alright, so we got our first flap cut made. So now normally I'd have flipped this over 57 times by now, but I'm just not doing that because it's just going to stress me out. So now, before we do anything, I'm going to the other side and I'm going to do the same exact cut. Now why am I doing that? Because I like the fact that it's still attached and I have a very good reference. Now if I cut this free, then it's going to be even more complicated to measure. Okay? So our halfway point is going to be whatever this is from here to there. Okay? So that's what I want to measure now. Okay, so that's good enough. So that'll get us our halfway point from here to here. So that's our start cut. Remember, that's just a little shallow, superficial cut. It's not a real cut. It may be a cut later, but right now it's not. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit. And how far down did I cut that? I cut that down to, let's just call it there, okay? Okay, so there's our superficial cut. I'm going to run the knife blade through there sideways to give it a little bit more of a intentional, oh shoot. Well, that cut went horrible. Sometimes you catch those little round foam pieces. Okay, so now the next points that we want to measure are going to be on the canoes themselves. So we've already got this cut point here, so we can get that first cut done. But let's go ahead and measure how deep we had, or how far down the wing we had cut. Okay, it looks like this will give us our cut to here. Looks like we need to go down to where that mark is. Okay, so now remember, we're going to go at a slight angle. Nope, we're not doing that yet. We're just going to go in here square and just make our initial line. Okay, so we got our initial line. So that panel is basically square. So now we need to carry out this cut which looks like we've got that set about right. Okay, so there's our first cut. And then we want to basically chase that to the other side of the canoe. Just giving us a reference point. Then we'll make a measurement to my second canoe. Okay, so now the second canoe, well, I guess it'd be the third canoe, sorry. Sorry, folks. Now we can just follow straight back to where we had cut the last one. And then we'll just measure to this one. Okay. Okay, so we got that cut made. Now let's measure out the last one. Okay, so we got that last one measured. Just going to come in from that same seam, make our little line. Oh, that was a horrifically bad cut. Okay, there's our better cut. Alright, great. So now that we've got that cut made, we're just going to confirm, even though this one should be pretty straightforward, the actual depth here on the back side of this canoe. Okay. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now we can go ahead and I want to just double check how I cut these canoes. Okay, you see how I kind of cut almost square to this part here. If you cut these at an angle, then your hinges are going to go at an angle and you will have weird things happen, trust me. You just kind of split the difference between the start angle and the end angle. Just like this. You'll understand here in a little bit. So we're just cutting straight up and down. I mean, you've probably already seen me do these flaps before. Flaps similar to this. If you've watched my channel for any length of time. Okay, so you see how they're square, 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 square to the shape of the canoe. Not square to the shape of the wing, not square to the shape of the actual flap. Okay, so now we have to cut at a bit of an angle, just like this. Same exact method as before, the only difference is going the wrong or the opposite direction. Now, if you don't make it all the way through on the first pass, that's fine. And part of the reason why those sloppy cuts are not going to make a huge difference, beyond the fact that it's a foam airplane, is that when we're done, we may have to actually take out some of the material to make this close up tight and not cause our servos to constantly work their butts off to stay positioned in the closed position. Which is one thing we're going to look at doing, guys, like we normally do when we do a flap install, is we're going to make sure that that linkage is square out or square out, depending on which direction you want the deployment. Of course, obviously, we're going to retract them like this. We're going to deploy them like this. We're going to retract them like this. So we want that all the way put putting all its force out this way so that there's no load on the actual rotary action of the servo. Which will make better sense when you see me do it, I hope. Okay, you see how I've got that slight angle there? Not huge angle, but just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to come back to me now. Okay, cool. So now they're both cut. Now, hypothetically, when we flip this thing over, the cut should be fairly close. They're probably not going to be exact, and it's going to drive me crazy until the day that I see it fly, and then I'll think, who cares? It looks awesome. But there's our cut. So now we need to go ahead and, oh, it's the scariest part, is to flip it over and see how bad this went. Yeah. So looks like there's our cuts. That's about exactly where I expected it, because your spoilers are going to cover up all this indisparity. And keeping in mind that if you don't like the way it looks, like here it looks like we got a little bit further than the molding, that's fine, because we're going to make these bigger anyway. Okay? So no big deal, no harm, no foul. Oh, that's a huge relief. It's a scary step, man. There's nothing you can do to guarantee a completely perfect outcome when you're cutting foam the way I just did. Other than you'll get better the more you screw up. The more times you've had a chance to learn what not to do. Okay, so now we got to break these things free. But I think I'm going to probably go ahead and get my cut, a little better penetration on my cuts. Okay. So I want to ride my blade in so I get the exact angle. So I'm just kind of pulling open the cut. And I'm letting the blade in there. Okay. Okay, you hear that noise? Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. So now I'm going to transition all the way across on the bottom. Okay. So like I said, there'll be a little bit of fine tuning we got to do to make all these angles line up, which is fine. That's just part of it. So I'm just cutting through like this. My finger's way back here. Okay, so this one looks like we're going to have to ride the blade in there a little bit. See, we're already experiencing some binding here. Of course, we're not going to put these up at all. Oh, it's free-ish. What am I bound on still? Yep, that was, I think, the last little bit. Crisis averted, guys. Heart attack avoided. So there you have it. Man, that's the scariest part of the process, is getting your first flap cut. So now, when this actuates, oh, it's going to be so gorgeous. If we hinge it right, we can try to do it in one fell swoop with one servo. But I don't know if that's going to work or not. We may have to take and hinge this together, like I did on the Airbus A380. Or I can do a linkage here and a linkage here, which means we have a hinge here and then a hinge here, which would allow this to move, and then we would have a hinge here, 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 and here. Or here and here at minimum, okay? And those would deploy downward. And that's kind of a complicated cut, guys. I've got to give it to you. That was not as easy as I'd hoped it might go. And there may be enough flex in this to where we could hinge it all together anyway. If we do the hinging here. But it might also look kind of dumb. So now the experimentation continues. But for now, we got to call it quits because we're almost out of memory on this video. Part 2 in the can. Part 3 coming at you at no time. Hope you come back for more. I think it's going to be awesome. No, scratch that. I know it's going to be awesome. But it might also be an awesome amount of work. Thanks for watching, guys. Check the description below. You'll have a complete list of the build series from infancy on this thing. Or at least for the flap mod. And once you have a chance to see how awesome this looks, you know, like these little details, like these Rolls-Royce logos. Which, yes, I know, this is an FWWDD. They had Engine Alliance engines in this particular plane, but we found some conflicting information on that. So, hey guys, thanks for watching. Come back for more. Part 3 coming in no time. Stay tuned.